She lay alone on the hospital bed, her body swollen, her breath, shallow machines beeping like a countdown she could not stop. This was the woman who once carried a man on her back when he had nothing. Now, as her kidneys failed, that same man refused to come. When she called him weak and afraid, he answered with impatience. "Can't you take a taxi?" Somewhere else in the city, laughter filled a living room she paid for while another woman drank champagne and mocked her pain. In a cold voice, her husband said the words that would later haunt him for if she dies, she dies. But fate was already moving quietly. In that same hospital, a stranger was listening. And sometimes when pride abandons you, grace arrives from the most unexpected place. If you're watching from anywhere in Africa or the diaspora, comment your country and local time below. And if stories of justice, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Before sickness, before betrayal, before the cold hospital walls became her world, Abini Okafor lived a life many admired quietly. She was not loud about her success, but it followed her like a calm shadow. By weekday mornings, she sat behind a neat desk at a mid-sized firm in Lagos, balancing accounts with steady hands and a mind sharpened by years of discipline. On weekends, she sold quality fabrics from a small shop she managed herself, greeting customers with warmth and patience. Through sacrifice and long nights of planning, Abini had achieved something many women around her still dreamed of. She owned a modest, two-bedroom house fully registered in her own name. People described her as gentle, beautiful, in an unforced way, with eyes that seemed to see beyond words. But strength lived beneath that softness. Abini had grown up watching her widowed mother struggle after her father's early death. She learned early that security was not promised to anyone. It had to be built. Across town, Kunlay Adeyemi lived a very different reality. His small printing shop sat between a phone repair kiosk and a provision store, its faded sign swinging slightly whenever heavy buses passed. The machines inside were old, loud, and unreliable. Some days, Kunla spent hours staring at the empty doorway, listening to the whir of ceiling fans and the voices of other men succeeding where he was failing. Customers complained. Suppliers demanded payment. The landlord had already warned him twice. Kunla was not lazy. He arrived early, wiped dust from his machines, and prayed silently for customers. But pride sat heavy on his chest. Each failure felt like a public announcement of his inadequacy as a man. In a society that measured worth by provision, Kunle felt himself shrinking. One hot afternoon, when frustration weighed heavier than the heat, the door to his shop opened. Abini stepped inside, holding a neatly arranged file against her chest. "Good afternoon," she said softly. Kunle looked up, startled by her presence. For a brief moment, the noise in his head went silent. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, just a simple blouse skirt and flat sandals, but her presence brought an unexpected calm. "Good afternoon," he replied, straightening his shoulders. "How can I help you? I need some flyers printed," Abini said, handing him the file. "It's for a church outreach program." Kunle flipped through the pages, quickly calculating costs in his head. His voice lowered slightly when he mentioned the price, bracing himself for negotiation. Many customers complained. Some insulted him, others walked away, but Abini simply nodded. "That's fine," she said, opening her purse and paying in full. Kunle blinked, surprised. "Thank you," he muttered. Over the next few days, Abini returned to check on the work. Each visit turned into a conversation. At first small talk, then longer exchanges. Kunle found himself opening up without meaning to about the economy, about customers who never paid, about dreams that felt too heavy to carry alone. Abini listened. Truly listened. "You're trying," she told him one evening as the sun dipped low and painted the street orange. "I can see it. Don't give up." No one had spoken to Kunle like that in a long time. Her words warmed him. yet something uneasy stirred inside his chest. When Abini casually mentioned her office job or how she managed a fabric business on weekends, Kunlay laughed lightly. "So you earn more than me," he joked. "It doesn't matter," she replied. "Money comes and goes, character stays." Kunlay smiled, but behind his eyes a darker voice whispered, "She has what you don't." From that point, their paths became intertwined, but not for the same reasons. For Abini, Kunlay represented hope, partnership, and love built from shared struggle. She admired his resilience and believed in his potential. For Kunlay, Abini became something else entirely, a measure of his own shortcomings and slowly a solution to them. Abini began stopping by more often. Sometimes she brought food jollof rice wrapped in foil-fried plantain beans or homemade meat pies. "You haven't eaten, have you?" she would ask. Kunlay accepted, shyly, gratitude mixing with embarrassment. Around them, the market women noticed. "That slim lady always comes to Kunlay's dead shop," one tomato seller whispered. "Love has entered," another replied. "But that boy's pride is too much." They were not wrong. As weeks passed, Abini shared more of her story. She spoke of her father's death, her mother selling fruits by the roadside to pay school fees, and the vow she made to herself to never become a burden to anyone. Kunlay listened closely. One day, curiosity pushed him further. "So, where do you stay?" he asked. "I have a small house," Abini replied casually. "It's in my name." "In your name," Kunlay repeated. "Yes, my mother advised me. A woman should always have something that belongs to her." Kunlay laughed, nodding. But something tightened painfully in his chest. A house, a stable job, a business. Still, he hid his thoughts behind praise. "You're amazing," he told her. "You inspire me." At night, alone in his rented room, Kunlay's thoughts were far less kind. "How can I be a man if my wife is richer? What will people say? They'll say I'm eating her money." Love was growing, but so was a dangerous plan. Soon, Abini introduced Kunlay to her family. Her mother, Mama Ifunanya, studied him carefully. She said little at first, but later pulled her daughter aside. "He's handsome," she admitted, "but I see pride in his eyes." "He's just stressed," Mama Abini replied. "Life is hard for him." Love made her blind to the warning signs. The way Kunlay frowned when she paid for dinner, the silence when she spoke about her achievements, the corrections in public small but sharp. When Kunlay finally asked for her hand in marriage, Abini cried tears of joy. He knelt under the mango tree behind her house, offering a modest ring, one he completed with money borrowed from her. "You are my blessing," he said. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, "yes." Neighbors celebrated, children clapped. Mama Ifunanya remained quiet, but for her daughter's happiness she agreed. Kunlay walked away that day smiling, not because he had found love, but because he believed he had secured his escape. Love did not arrive in Abini Okafor's life like a sudden storm. It came quietly in steady footsteps and shared silences that felt safe. After the proposal under the mango tree, Kunlay Adiemi became a constant presence around her. He visited more often, sometimes helping her carry fabric bales into the shop, other times sitting with her on the veranda as evening prayers floated from nearby houses. To Abini, this was how love should grow slow, patient, rooted in trust. She began to imagine a future where they would struggle together and rise together. Kunlay, however, was imagining something else entirely. At the printing shop, his customers increased slightly. Some of it was luck. Some of it was Abini. She mentioned his services at her office. She designed a cleaner flyer for him without charging a kobo. She even advised him on better pricing and customer care. Kunlay accepted her help with a smile that looked grateful on the surface. Inside it tasted bitter. Every success felt borrowed. When customers praised the improvement, he nodded proudly. But when anyone asked, "Who helped you?" his chest tightened. He hated that the answer, even unspoken, was her. Still, Abini saw progress and rejoiced. She brought food more often now, not just because he needed it, but because she enjoyed caring for him. She liked seeing him eat, liked how his face softened when he laughed at her jokes. To her, these were signs of partnership. To Kunlay, they became reminders that he was being fed, helped, lifted. And pride does not like reminders. One afternoon, while Abini waited for flyers to finish printing, Kunlay's friend Tunde stopped by the shop. Tunde was loud, confident, always speaking as if the world owed him something. "Ah, Kunlay," he exclaimed. "So, this is the woman." Abini smiled politely. "She's my fiancée," Kunlay said quickly. Tunde raised an eyebrow. "She looks comfortable." Kunlay laughed too loudly. "Very comfortable." Tunde leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. "Just make sure people don't think you're the one being carried." The words struck Kunlay harder than he expected. That night, Kunlay lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of his room. Abini's kindness replayed in his mind, but instead of warmth, it stirred resentment. "She doesn't even know she's making me look small." When Abini spoke about her mother's advice that a woman should always protect herself financially, Kunlay nodded outwardly. Inwardly, it sounded like a threat. "So you're already planning for life without me?" Small moments began to shift. If Abini corrected a mistake on a document Kunlay printed, his jaw tightened. If she suggested saving money before the wedding, he accused her of being fearful. If she paid for something without consulting him, he reminded her loudly that he was the man. Abini noticed the changes, but interpreted them generously. "He's under pressure," she told herself. Marriage fears, financial stress. She did not want to be like the women she had seen growing up, always complaining, always nagging. So she softened her voice. She apologized even when she wasn't wrong. She learned to swallow discomfort. Kunlay, on the other hand, was learning something else. He was learning how power felt when he could make a strong woman bend. When wedding preparations began, Abini's excitement filled the house. She planned carefully, making lists, calling relatives, budgeting wisely. Kunlay agreed to everything with a calm smile, but each item on the list reminded him of a painful truth. Without her, this wedding would not happen. The traditional ceremony was beautiful. Drums echoed through the compound. Aunties danced with wrappers tied tightly around their waists. Money sprayed into the air like blessings. Abini's friends hugged her, calling her lucky. Kunlay moved among the guests like a king. He admired the chairs, the food, the decorations, all paid for mostly by Abini, and felt a strange satisfaction settle in his chest. "This is not bad," he thought. "With her money behind me, I can rise." The church wedding followed shortly after. As the pastor asked the familiar question whether he would love and cherish her in sickness and in health, Kunlay answered confidently, "I do." But somewhere deep inside, another voice added quietly, "I do for now." Their first night as husband and wife was spent in Abini's house, freshly painted and furnished. As she rested her head on his chest, she whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." Kunlay kissed her forehead. "We'll build a big life together," he said. It was the first lie of many. Marriage settled into routine quickly. Abini woke early, cooked, prepared for work, and still found time to manage her fabric business on weekends. She took pride in being a supportive wife. She asked Kunlay about his day. She encouraged him when clients delayed payment. She celebrated every small win at the printing shop. Kunlay's business improved modestly. He repaired old machines with money she provided. He expanded services. Customers returned. From the outside, it looked like progress. Inside Kunlay, dissatisfaction grew. People whispered. If not for his wife, that man would still be struggling. Kunlay heard those words even when they weren't spoken. He began staying out late, claiming he was networking. He grew irritable when Abini asked questions. At night, he scrolled through his phone, comparing his life to others, wondering why success still felt incomplete. One Friday evening, he followed Tunde to a lounge in town. The music was loud. The lights were dim. Perfume and alcohol filled the air. For the first time in a long while, Kunlay felt invisible among strangers, and he liked it. That was where he met Sede. She laughed loudly, touched his arm casually, and looked at him as if he was the most important man in the room. "So, what do you do?" she asked. Kunlay straightened. "I run a successful printing business," he said. "I also manage some properties." The lie slid out easily. Sade's eyes sparkled. "Wow, you look like a man who knows what he wants." Those words sank deep. For the first time in a long time, Kunlay felt admired not as a struggling husband, not as someone being helped, but as someone being desired. From that night, something shifted permanently. At home, Abini continued loving with open hands. In Kunlay's heart, something dark had already chosen a different direction. After the wedding, excitement faded, and the last relatives returned to their homes. Reality settled quietly into Abini Okafor's house. It was not a grand place, just a modest two-bedroom home with cream-colored walls and a small veranda, but it carried the weight of years of sacrifice. Abini loved that house. Every tile reminded her of late nights balancing accounts of weekends, selling fabric under the sun of her mother's tired hands, counting coins to pay school fees long ago. Kunlay Adeyemi moved into the house with his bags and his pride. At first, he admired the space openly. He walked through the living room touching the curtains, opening cupboards, sitting on the sofa like a man inspecting his kingdom. "You've really done well for yourself," he said one evening. Abini smiled. It wasn't easy, but admiration did not last long. One night, as they prepared dinner together, Kunlay asked casually, "So, the house documents, whose name is on them?" Abini paused, surprised by the question, but answered honestly, "Mine." Kunlay looked up sharply. "Only yours." "Yes," she said calmly. "My mother advised me long ago. She said a woman should always have something that belongs to her just in case. Just in case." Those 3 words echoed in Kunlay's mind like an insult. He forced a laugh. "Your mother thinks ahead. She lived through a lot," Abini replied. "She wanted me protected." Kunlay nodded, but something inside him twisted painfully. That night, as he lay beside Abini, sleep refused to come. He stared at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing. "So, even in marriage, you're protecting yourself from me." In the weeks that followed, the house, once a symbol of safety, became a silent battlefield. Kunlay noticed every reminder that it was not truly his. The way Abini discussed repairs confidently. The way neighbors greeted her as the owner. The way she made decisions without asking him first. Each moment chipped away at his sense of control. When Abini suggested repainting the kitchen, Kunlay snapped. "Why do you always decide things alone?" "I wasn't deciding alone," she said gently. "I was just suggesting." "Well, you're married now," he replied sharply. "Things should go through me." Abini apologized, confused. She did not understand that the issue was not paint, it was power. Kunlay began correcting her in public, even over small things. If she spoke confidently at gatherings, he interrupted. If she paid for groceries quickly, he frowned. At church, when people praised her business sense, Kunlay shifted uncomfortably, his smile stiff. Mama Ifunanya noticed. One afternoon she visited unannounced and found tension hanging thick in the air. After Kunlay stepped outside to take a call, she pulled Abini aside. "My daughter," she said quietly, "does your husband struggle with your success?" Abini shook her head quickly. "No, Mama. He's just stressed." Mama Ifunanya studied her face but said nothing more. At night, Kunlay's thoughts grew darker. How will people respect me if my wife owns the house? They'll say I married up. They'll say I'm living under her roof. The whispers haunted him, real or imagined. They felt the same. Determined to reclaim his sense of masculinity, Kunlay became stricter at home. He demanded respect, loudly mistaking fear for honor. He insisted on being consulted for decisions he had never cared about before. When Abini disagreed gently, he accused her of acting superior. Abini began walking on eggshells. She reduced conversations about her work. She stopped mentioning profits. She tried to shrink herself, believing love required sacrifice. But shrinking only fed Kunlay's hunger for dominance. Meanwhile, the printing business improved slightly thanks to Abini's earlier support. Kunlay bought new ink cartridges, repaired one machine, and attracted a few loyal customers. Outwardly, things looked better. Inside him, the resentment deepened. He could not escape the truth. Every improvement carried her fingerprints. One evening, after a long day, Kunlay sat alone in the living room while Abini prepared dinner. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Tunde. "Guy, how married life? Hope you're enjoying, boss, life, oh?" Kunlay stared at the screen. Boss life, he scoffed bitterly. Boss of what boss, under whose roof? That night, Kunlay lay awake again, replaying memories of the proposal, the wedding, the house. I rushed into this, he thought. I didn't plan properly. The realization frightened him. Marriage to him was supposed to elevate his status, not expose his insecurities. And now, every corner of the house reminded him that he had entered a union where the balance tilted dangerously away from him. Instead of confronting his own pride, Kunlay chose a different path. He began to build a version of himself that did not exist. At the printing shop, he exaggerated his success. He spoke boldly about projects and properties. He wore confidence like armor. When customers asked about his family, he bragged casually, implying ownership where there was none. "My house," he would say. "My car, my connections." The lies gave him temporary relief. At home, Abini sensed the growing distance. She asked him once softly, "Are you happy, Kunlay?" He hesitated. "Why wouldn't I be? You seem far. I'm just tired," he snapped. She nodded, swallowing her worry. What Abini did not know was that Kunlay's heart had already begun drifting away from gratitude, away from partnership, away from truth. He was no longer measuring his life by love. He was measuring it by how small he could make the woman who had given him everything. And deep inside, a dangerous decision was forming, one that would later cost him far more than his pride. By the time Kunlay Adeyemi asked for Abini Okafor's hand in marriage, the decision had already been made in two very different hearts. For Abini love had grown quietly but deeply. She believed in building a future together in patience and shared struggle. She had seen Kunlay at his lowest, frustrated, tired, uncertain, and she chose him anyway. To her, marriage was not an escape, but a commitment. She imagined two people pushing each other forward, covering each other's weaknesses, standing together when life pressed hard. For Kunlay, the proposal meant something else. It was not the culmination of love, but the securing of a foundation, a safety net. A guarantee that the life he wanted, respect, comfort, recognition, would no longer feel so far away. He chose a familiar, quiet evening. Abini had just returned from work, her sandals dusty, her shoulders heavy from a long day. Kunlay asked her to step into the backyard beneath the mango tree that had watched her grow from a young woman into the owner of the house she stood on. He knelt awkwardly, pulling out a small ring. "Abini," he said, voice, soft eyes, carefully rehearsed. "You are my blessing. You believed in me when things were hard. Will you marry me?" Her breath caught. In that moment, she did not see his fears, his pride, or his calculations. She saw a man asking for partnership. She saw hope. Yes, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Yes. Neighbors heard the excitement and gathered quickly. Children clapped. Women ululated. Someone shouted congratulations across the fence. The moment felt real, sacred, alive. Mama Ifunanya watched from the doorway, her heart heavy with questions she could not yet answer. Preparations moved fast. Abini took charge not because she wanted control, but because that was who she had always been. She planned carefully, budgeting, calling relatives, coordinating vendors. Kunlay agreed to everything with nods and smiles. When money ran short, Abini filled the gap quietly. She told herself this was temporary. He will stand strong once we are settled, she believed. The traditional wedding day arrived in color and sound. Drums echoed through the compound. Aunties danced in bright wrappers, spraying money on the ground. Plates overflowed with food. Laughter filled the air. Kunlay walked among the guests like royalty. He admired the chairs, the canopy, the decorations, all paid for mostly by Abini, and felt something close to triumph. This is how life should be, he thought, with support behind me. Friends shook his hand, congratulating him on marrying a good woman. Kunlay accepted the praise easily, allowing them to assume whatever they wanted. Abini, radiant in her attire, felt joy bubbling in her chest. She believed she was stepping into a future that honored her sacrifices. The church wedding followed soon after. As the pastor asked the solemn question whether Kunlay would love and cherish Abini in sickness and in health, Kunlay answered clearly, "I do." Abini's heart swelled. She did not hear the silent addition inside him. "I do, as long as I'm comfortable." Their first night as husband and wife was spent in Abini's house, now freshly painted and neatly furnished. Candles glowed softly. The house felt warm, hopeful. Abini rested her head on Kunlay's chest. "Thank you for choosing me," she whispered. Kunlay kissed her forehead, his mind elsewhere. "We'll build a big life together," he said. He believed that part. What he did not believe was the cost. Marriage settled into routine quickly. Abini woke before sunrise, cooked breakfast, prepared for work, and returned in the evening to continue managing her fabric business. On weekends, she handled customers with the same grace she brought into her home. Kunlay's printing business improved slightly. With the money Abini provided, he repaired machines, replaced worn parts, and expanded services. She even helped design better flyers, pulling clients from her office to his shop. To Abini, this was teamwork. To Kunlay, it was humiliation disguised as help. Whenever people whispered, if not for his wife, Kunlay felt his chest tighten. He smiled outwardly, but bitterness burned inside. At home, small cracks appeared. Kunlay grew sensitive to how money was spent. He demanded to know why certain purchases were made. He frowned when Abini paid bills without discussing them. If she mentioned profits, he accused her of bragging. "Do you think money makes you better than me?" he asked one night. "No," she replied quickly. "I just want us to be stable." But stability to Kunlay felt like submission to her success. He started coming home later. When Abini asked questions, he waved them away. "I'm working," he said sharply. "You want me to fail?" She apologized again. She learned to soften her voice even more. Yet the imbalance deepened. One evening, after a church program, Kunlay followed an old friend into a lounge downtown. The music was loud, the lights low, the air thick with perfume and alcohol. For the first time in weeks, Kunlay felt unseen and unjudged. That was where Sade entered his life fully. She was bold, loud, and confident. She laughed freely and leaned close when she spoke. She looked at Kunlay like he was already the man he wanted to be. "So what do you do?" she asked. Kunlay swallowed and straightened his back. "I run a successful printing business," he said. "I also manage some properties." The lies felt powerful. Sade's eyes lit up. "You look like a man who takes charge." Those words slid into Kunlay's heart like sweet poison. From that moment, he began living two lives. At home, Abini continued loving with open hands, cooking, encouraging, supporting. She waited up when he came late. She prayed silently when his temper rose. Elsewhere, Kunlay tasted admiration without effort, without sacrifice, without feeling small. And slowly, quietly, the marriage that Abini was nurturing with devotion became something Kunlay was already preparing to abandon. Marriage did not slow Abini Okafor down. If anything, it made her move faster. Every morning, she rose before dawn, tied her headscarf, and entered the kitchen quietly so as not to wake Kunlay Adeyemi. She cooked, cleaned, prepared for work, and still found time to review fabric orders before stepping out into Lagos traffic. At the office, she balanced figures and met deadlines. On weekends, she stood behind her shop counter smiling at customers even when her feet ached. To Abini, love meant showing up again and again. She believed a strong woman did not compete with her husband. She supported him. Kunlay's printing business began to improve in small but noticeable ways. Machines that once groaned now worked more smoothly after repairs she paid for. Flyers looked sharper after she redesigned templates for him. When her office needed bulk printing, she sent the job to his shop without hesitation. "Let's grow this thing together," she told him once. Kunlay nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, each improvement felt like a reminder of dependence. At the shop, customers praised the changes. "Your work is better now," one man said. "You must be doing something right," another added. Kunlay thanked them politely, but when he locked up in the evenings, his chest burned. "They're praising her effort, not mine." The whispers came soon after. If not for his wife, that man married well. She carried him. Kunlay heard those words even in silence. At home, his mood shifted. He began questioning expenses aggressively. He demanded to know why certain bills were paid when they were. If Abini bought groceries without consulting him, he complained. "You don't respect me," he accused one night. "I thought I was helping," she replied softly. "You think money makes you smarter." He snapped. Abini froze. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how love had turned into accusation. She reduced herself further. She stopped talking about her work. She hid her successes. She made herself smaller in conversations, believing peace required sacrifice. Kunlay interpreted her silence as submission, and submission fed his hunger for control. He began correcting her in public. If she spoke confidently at gatherings, he interrupted. If she laughed freely with friends, he frowned. If someone praised her, he redirected attention to himself. At church, when a woman congratulated Abini on her business, Kunlay stiffened. "She just helps here and there," he said dismissively. Abini smiled politely, swallowing the sting. Mama Ifunanya noticed. One afternoon she visited and found tension hanging heavy in the living room. Kunlay barely greeted her before stepping out to take a call. Mama Ifunanya studied her daughter carefully. "My child," she said quietly, "are you at peace in this marriage?" Abini hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Yes, Mama. Kunlay is just under pressure." Mama Ifunanya sighed but said nothing more. That night, Kunlay came home late again. "Where were you?" Abini asked gently. "Working," he replied sharply, but the smell of alcohol betrayed him. When she tried to speak, he waved her away. "I'm tired, don't start." She retreated silently. Meanwhile, Kunlay's second life was growing. At the lounge, Sade welcomed him with admiration and laughter. She never asked questions about bills or responsibilities. She never reminded him of reality. She called him boss. She praised his confidence. She made him feel powerful. Kunlay fed her lies easily. "This house," he said once, scrolling through photos on his phone. "Mine. My wife just stays there. She's too independent. Makes a man feel useless." Assad hissed sympathetically. "A man like you needs respect." Those words sank deep. Back home, Kunlay grew colder. He stopped sharing meals with Abini. He ate out more often. When she asked if something was wrong, he snapped. "Do you want to control everything?" She shook her head. "I just want us to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, turning away. Loneliness crept into Abini's heart quietly. She prayed more, she fasted sometimes. She asked God what she had done wrong. She did not know another woman had already entered her marriage, not physically yet, but emotionally fully. One morning, Abini woke up feeling strange. Her feet were swollen, her head throbbed. Her face looked puffy in the mirror. Maybe it's stress, she told herself. She had been carrying too much for too long. At work, she nearly collapsed while walking to the restroom. Colleagues rushed to her side, alarmed. "Abini, your eyes are yellow," one of them said. "You don't look well at all." They insisted she see a doctor. She called Kunlay. "Please," she said weakly. "Can you come take me to the hospital?" Kunlay glanced at his phone impatiently. He was with Sade, who was showing him a new phone she wanted. "Can't you take a taxi?" he replied. The words hit Abini like a slap. She swallowed. "Okay, I'll manage." At the hospital, tests were run. The doctor frowned as he studied the results. "Madame," he said gently, "your kidneys are not functioning properly. We need to monitor you closely." Fear wrapped around her heart. When Kunlay arrived hours later, he stood by the door, arms crossed. "What is all this?" he asked. "Hospital again." The doctor explained the situation carefully. Kunlay's first response was not concern. "How much will this cost?" he asked. Abini stared at him, disbelief flooding her eyes. "Kunlay," she whispered, "I'm scared." He sighed impatiently. "You worry too much." As he turned to leave, Abini faced the wall and cried silently. In the corridor, the doctor stopped Kunlay. "Sir," he said, "your wife's condition is serious. Dialysis may be required. Later, we might discuss a transplant." Kunlay's eyes widened. "Transplant," he repeated sharply. "You mean someone will give her kidney?" "It's a possibility," the doctor replied. "Often a spouse is the best match." Kunlay scoffed. "Me give my kidney." He laughed nervously. "Doctor, please. Just give her drugs." The doctor watched him with disappointment as Kunlay typed a message on his phone. "Babe, this situation is stressing me. I'll come over later." As night fell, Abini lay alone in the hospital bed listening to the steady beeping of machines. Her body felt heavy. Her heart felt abandoned. The imbalance in her marriage had reached its most dangerous point. She had given everything. And now, when her life hung in the balance, the man she married had already chosen himself. From the day Abini Okafor was admitted into the hospital, Kunlay Adeyemi stopped pretending with himself. The distance between them, once emotional, became physical. He visited less. When he came, he stood by the door like a stranger waiting to leave. He asked questions about bills, not pain, about costs, not fear. Abini noticed everything, even when she said nothing. Her body weakened, but her mind remained sharp. She saw how Kunlay avoided eye contact, how his phone never left his hand, how relief crossed his face when nurses finished rounds and nothing urgent was required. At night, after he left, she cried quietly into her pillow, asking God the same question over and over. What did I do wrong? While Abini fought for her life under white hospital lights, Kunlay was building a second world, one that made him feel alive again. Sade welcomed him without questions. She did not ask about hospital reports. She did not ask about swollen legs or dialysis. She did not ask about vows. She poured him drinks, laughed loudly, and pulled him into a version of himself that felt powerful and unburdened. "So, your wife is still in the hospital?" she asked one evening, swirling juice in her glass. "Yes," Kunlay replied carelessly. "Doctors are talking plenty. What are they saying now? Something about kidneys." "Transplant nonsense. Saad burst into laughter. Transplant for who for her? She shook her head. Is she the only woman in this world? Kunlay laughed with her. The sound echoed long after. Sade leaned closer, her voice low and persuasive. A man like you shouldn't carry another person's sickness. You're still young. You deserve enjoyment. Those words entered Kunlay's heart like poison wrapped in honey. He began staying with Sade more openly now. He told Abini he had late work at the shop. He stopped answering calls promptly. When Abini texted, he replied hours later, if at all. One afternoon, Kunlay took Sade to see the house. Abini was still in the hospital. Sade stepped into the living room, eyes widening as she turned slowly in a circle. So, this whole place is yours? She asked, admiration dripping from her voice. Kunlay hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yes, the lie came easily. My wife just stays here, he added. She doesn't really understand respect. Sade sat down on the sofa like a queen claiming her throne. You're enjoying, she said, but you're wasting your time. A woman who can't submit will always make you feel small. Kunlay exhaled deeply. Sometimes, he admitted, I feel like a stranger in my own house. Sade smiled, then stopped being one. From that day, the gap between Kunlay and Abini widened into something that could no longer be bridged by patience or prayer alone. Back in the hospital, Abini's condition worsened. The swelling increased. Her appetite disappeared. She grew tired even after lying down all day. Dialysis began slow draining sessions that left her weak and nauseous. The walls of the ward became her world. One afternoon, the doctor sat beside her bed, his face serious. Abini, he said gently, I need to be honest with you. Her heart raced. Please. Your kidneys are failing. Dialysis will help for now, but long-term you may need a kidney transplant. The words landed like stones. A transplant, she whispered. Yes. Someone with a matching blood type can donate one kidney and live a normal life. Often, close family members or a spouse are the best options. Abini nodded slowly, tears blurring her vision. Her thoughts went straight to Kunlay. That evening, when he finally came, she held his hand tightly. Did the doctor talk to you? She asked. He mentioned something, Kunlay replied, distractedly scrolling through his phone. They said I might need a transplant, she whispered. Kunlay, I'm scared. He pulled his hand away gently. Let's not jump ahead, maybe you won't need it. But if I do, she asked, her voice shaking, would you think about donating? Kunlay stood up abruptly. Abini, don't start, he said. Do you know what you're asking, a whole kidney? She stared at him. I'm asking you to stand by me. Let's just do dialysis first. He snapped. Stop crying. He walked out. That night, Abini lay awake whispering prayers into the darkness. God, please touch his heart. At that same hour, Kunlay was at a restaurant with Sade. She's still talking about transplant, Sade scoffed. Yes, she thinks you'll die for her. Sade laughed. For what? A woman who already has everything, Kunlay shook his head. Never. Sade placed her hand on his. Leave her, start fresh. The seed was planted. Days later, the doctor called Kunlay in for a serious discussion. Mr. Adeyemi, he said, your wife's kidneys have failed. Dialysis can keep her alive for some time, but we must plan for transplant. Kunlay's face remained calm. I will never give my kidney to that woman. The words were sharp, final. The doctor blinked. She is your wife. Kunlay shrugged. I can marry another wife. I can't buy another kidney. A nurse in the room gasped softly. Later, back in the ward, Abini noticed a change in the nurses' faces. Their eyes carried new pity. Is everything okay? She asked weakly. Just rest, one nurse replied. God is in control. But whispers travel faster than truth can hide. One afternoon, Abini heard her name spoken softly in the corridor. The husband said he will never donate. Poor woman. She's alone. Her heart shattered quietly. Back at the house, Kunlay fully opened the door for Sade. They packed Abini's clothes into one room and locked it. Sade's perfumes replaced Abini's gentle scent. Music played late into the night. Laughter filled spaces once held by prayer. Neighbors noticed. "I thought his wife was in the hospital," someone whispered. Gossip spread quickly. One evening, Sade leaned against Kunlay's chest. "I'm late," she whispered. "For what?" "My monthly flow. I think I'm pregnant." Kunlay's eyes lit up. "My own family," he said. "Not that sick burden." They opened champagne in Abini's living room and celebrated loudly. While they drank and laughed, Abini lay in the hospital tubes running into her body, whispering into the night, "Kunlay, where are you?" No answer came. Only the cold, steady beeping of the machines replied. And in that silence her suffering reached its deepest point, unaware that fate was already preparing a turn she could never have imagined. The nights in the hospital stretched longer than the days. Under the pale glow of fluorescent lights, Abini Okafor learned the sound of loneliness, the soft hiss of oxygen, the steady beep of monitors, the footsteps of nurses changing shifts. Dialysis drained her body and thinned her voice. After each session she felt hollow, like something precious had been scooped out and replaced with fatigue. Kunlay Adeyemi came less and less. When he did, he stood near the door, arms crossed, eyes drifting to his phone. He never sat beside her bed anymore. He never held her hand unless she reached first. And even then his grip felt distant, temporary. One afternoon the doctor returned with a calm but heavy expression. "Abini," he said gently, "we've done everything we can with medication. Dialysis is keeping you stable, but it cannot be a long-term solution. We must prepare for a kidney transplant." The word echoed in her mind, transplant. Her lips trembled. "How long do I have?" The doctor paused. "It's not about time, it's about action." She nodded, tears slipping down the side of her face. Who can donate?" He did not answer immediately. "We will test potential donors." Often, spouses are the best matches. That evening, Abini waited for Kunlay. When he arrived, she gathered all her courage and held his hand tightly. "Kunlay," she whispered, "the doctor said I might need a transplant." He sighed, as if she were asking for too much. "They say many things in hospitals," he replied. "But if I do," she pressed, her voice breaking, "would you consider donating? Just consider it." Kunlay pulled his hand away slowly. "Abini," he said, standing up. "Do you know what you're asking me? I'm asking you to stand by me." He laughed without humor. "A whole kidney? Let's not be dramatic. Focus on dialysis." She stared at him, stunned. "Kunlay," she whispered, "I'm scared." "Stop thinking negative," he snapped. "You'll be fine." And with that, he walked out. The door closed with a finality that echoed louder than the machines. That same night, Kunlay sat across from Sade in a quiet restaurant, candlelight reflecting off her polished nails. "She's still talking about transplant," he complained. Sade scoffed. "Is she serious? She wants me to donate." Sade burst into laughter, covering her mouth theatrically. "For what? So you die with her?" Kunlay shook his head. "Never," Good Sade said firmly. "You have a future. Don't let sickness drag you down." Those words settled deep inside him, firming a decision he had already made. Days later, the doctor called Kunlay for another meeting. This time his tone was direct. "Mr. Adeyemi, your wife's kidneys have failed. Dialysis can keep her alive temporarily, but a transplant is necessary." Kunlay's face hardened. "I will never give my kidney to that woman." The room fell silent. "She is your wife," the doctor said quietly. Kunlay shrugged. "I can marry another wife. I can't buy another kidney." A nurse standing nearby gasped softly, her eyes filling with tears. Kunlay did not notice. What he did not know was that the office door had been left slightly open. A cleaner mopping the corridor paused, stunned by what she heard. Later that afternoon, whispers followed her mop down the hall. "Did you hear what that man said? He left his wife to die?" God forbid. Back in the ward, Abini sensed the shift before anyone spoke. Nurses avoided her eyes. Their smiles were forced. Pity clung to their movements. "Is everything okay?" she asked weakly. "Yes, madam," one nurse replied softly. "Please rest. But truth has strong legs. It walks even when people try to hold it back." That evening, her younger brother, Tunde Okafor, arrived. His face was tight with anger, his hands clenched into fists. "That man you married is wicked," he said, sitting beside her bed. Abini frowned. "What are you saying?" Tunde swallowed hard. "The doctor called him again today." He put the call on speaker. "I was in the office collecting your files." Her heart skipped. "I heard everything," Tunde continued. "He said he would never give you his kidney. He said, if you die, you die." The world went silent. Abini stared at the wall, her mind refusing to process the words. "He also mentioned another woman," Tunde added quietly. "He said she's his real woman, and she's pregnant." Something inside Abini shattered. It was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was the sound of years of trust collapsing into dust. She turned her face toward the wall and cried not the soft tears of fear, but the deep, broken sobs of betrayal. Nurses paused at the doorway, their own eyes wet. From the bed beside her, a man listened quietly. He had been admitted earlier that day after a minor accident, bruised forehead, leg in a cast. His name was Yemi Balogun. He had noticed Abini's thin arms, the sadness that clung to her like a second gown. He had heard her prayers in the night. Now he heard the truth. As Abini's sobs filled the room, something burned in Yemi's chest. How could a man abandon his wife like this? That night, as the ward grew quiet and moonlight slipped through the window, Yemi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. If her own husband can leave her to die, he thought, then the world is crueler than I imagined. Abini whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. "God, I don't want to die like this. I worked hard, I loved deeply. Why am I alone?" Yemi turned his head slightly. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She wiped her tears quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were awake." "No need to apologize," he replied. "Hospitals make people think too much." She hesitated, then spoke. Words poured out slowly at first, then in waves. She told him about meeting Kunlay, about believing in him, about helping him when he had nothing. She spoke of the house, the marriage, the sickness, the abandonment. "My husband doesn't come anymore," she whispered. "I don't even know where he is." Yemi listened, jaw clenched. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly. For the first time in weeks, Abini felt seen not as a patient, not as a burden, but as a human being in pain. That night, loneliness found company, and in the heart of a stranger, a decision began to form, one that would change everything. Morning came softly into the hospital ward, but for Abini Okafor, sleep had brought no rest. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her chest heavy with truths she never wanted to hear. The words her brother spoke the night before still rang in her ears, sharp and merciless. "If you die, you die." She lay facing the wall, breathing shallowly, afraid that if she turned around, the reality would become permanent. Beside her, Yemi Balagun sat upright on his bed, his injured leg stretched out carefully. He had not slept either. The image of Abini's shaking shoulders and the sound of her broken sobs had settled deep in his mind. He was a stranger in her story, yet he felt like an unwilling witness to a great injustice. A nurse entered quietly, checking drips and charts. When she reached Abini, her voice softened. "How are you feeling this morning?" Abini did not turn. I'm alive, she said faintly. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. That's good. After the nurse left, silence filled the room again. Yemi cleared his throat gently. Good morning. Abini turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes for the first time in daylight. He looked ordinary, short-beard, calm-face eyes that carried something steady and sincere. Good morning, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They did not speak again for a while. Sometimes pain did not need words. Later that morning, the doctor came in with 2 junior staff members. He greeted both patients and then turned to Abini, his expression careful. We'll continue dialysis today, he said, and we're still looking at donor options. Abini nodded without enthusiasm. After the doctor left, Yemi shifted on his bed. May I ask you something? He said gently. Abini shrugged weakly. You can ask. Does it have to be your husband? Yemi asked. The donor. The question startled her. I think, usually, she said slowly, or family. Yemi nodded thoughtfully. But it doesn't have to be right. She looked at him more fully now. Why are you asking? Yemi hesitated. He chose his words carefully. I just want to understand how it works, he said. That's all. Abini did not press him. Her mind was too tired to chase meaning. Later that afternoon, while Abini slept lightly after dialysis, Yemi asked the nurse to call the doctor back. When the doctor returned, Yemi spoke quietly. Doctor, I want to ask something. Yes, Yemi, the doctor said. How are you feeling? I'm fine, he replied, but it's about her. The doctor followed his gaze to Abini's bed. What if someone else wants to donate? Yemi asked. Does it have to be a husband or family member? The doctor studied him carefully. Anyone can donate as long as they're healthy, willing, and compatible. Yemi took a deep breath. Then, I want to be tested. The doctor's eyes widened slightly. You, he asked, you barely know her. I know enough, Yemi replied calmly. I know she's alone, I know she's kind, and I know she doesn't deserve to die because someone else chose pride. The doctor sighed slowly. Yemi, this is not a small decision, he said. It's surgery. It has risks. You can live with 1 kidney, yes, but it changes your life. I understand, Yemi said. Please do the tests. The doctor nodded, still unsure. We'll run them. But think very carefully. I already have, Yemi replied. Blood samples were taken quietly. Forms were filled. No one told Abini. Yemi did not want to raise hope in a heart already broken. That evening, Abini woke to find him sitting quietly reading. You're very quiet, she said. I've always been. He replied with a faint smile. She studied him for a moment. Thank you for listening last night. He nodded. Sometimes that's all people need. She sighed. I thought love meant sacrifice. I didn't know it could also mean abandonment. Yemi looked at her steadily. Love that abandons was never love. The words settled gently like a bomb. Over the next few days, the tests continued. Yemi endured scans, blood work, questions about his health and family history. He called his mother, who cried loudly on the phone. Have you gone mad? She shouted. A stranger. She's not a stranger to God, Yemi replied softly, and she raised me to help people. His mother wept, argued, prayed, and finally surrendered. If you are sure, she said, then may God go before you. Meanwhile, Abini's strength declined further. Her appetite vanished completely. She slept, more spoke less. Sometimes she stared into space for long minutes, lost in thoughts she did not share. One evening, she whispered to Yemi, Do you think God has forgotten me? Yemi shook his head. No, I think he's working quietly. She smiled weakly. You sound very sure. I am, he said. Some people leave you, but that doesn't mean heaven has. Days later, the doctor returned with a strange look on his face. Yemi, he said softly. "You're a match." Yemi closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. "And her," he asked. "She's stable enough for surgery," the doctor replied. "But we need her consent." Yemi nodded. "I'll talk to her." That evening, Yemi turned to Abini's bed. "Abini," he said gently. "Yes, you're not dying here," he said with calm certainty. She laughed weakly. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." She looked at him, curiosity flickering through her exhaustion. "You don't know that she said." "I do," he replied quietly. She did not know that the man beside her had already offered a part of his own body to save her life. She did not know that, while her husband celebrated elsewhere, a stranger had chosen sacrifice over comfort. But fate had already crossed their paths. And soon the truth would come out, bringing shock tears and a new beginning born from the ashes of betrayal. The truth did not arrive with noise. It came softly, like a careful knock on a door already bruised by loss. Abini Okafor was sitting upright for the first time in days when the doctor returned, accompanied by a senior nurse. Her body felt lighter than before, though weakness still clung to her limbs like damp cloth. She noticed the doctor's expression, immediately serious but not hopeless. "Abini," he said gently, pulling a chair closer to her bed, "we have news." Her heart jumped. "Good news or bad?" "Both," he replied honestly. "Your kidney function has deteriorated further. Dialysis cannot sustain you indefinitely, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Someone has volunteered to donate a kidney." Abini's breath caught. "Who?" she whispered. The doctor did not answer immediately. He stepped aside. Yemi Balagun moved closer, his crutches clicking softly against the floor. "It's me," he said quietly. For a moment, Abini thought she had misheard. "You?" she repeated, disbelief flooding her voice. "Yemi, we barely know each other." He nodded. "I know, but I know enough." Tears welled in her eyes as understanding slowly formed. "You asked the doctor. You did the tests, yes." She shook her head weakly. "No, I can't accept that." "What about your life?" "Your future?" Yemi smiled gently. "My future means nothing if I walk away knowing I could help and didn't." The nurse turned away discreetly, wiping her eyes. Abini's chest heaved as tears spilled freely. "Why would you do this for me?" Yemi looked straight into her tired eyes. "Because someone should have stood by you. He didn't. I will." The room fell silent, heavy with emotion. The doctor cleared his throat. "We still need consent from both of you. There are risks. This is major surgery." Abini sobbed openly now. "I don't deserve this." "None of us deserve kindness," Yemi replied softly. "That's why it matters." After hours of prayer conversation and paperwork, Abini finally nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "If you are truly sure." "I accept." Yemi reached for her hand. "Being alive will be enough payment." The decision rippled through the ward like a quiet miracle. Preparations began immediately. More tests, more forms, more waiting. Yemi's mother arrived the next day, her eyes red from crying. She looked at Abini for a long moment, then pulled her into a gentle embrace. "My son has always had a stubborn heart," she said. "But God uses stubborn hearts sometimes." Abini cried into her shoulder, overwhelmed by a kindness she had not expected to experience again. The morning of the surgery arrived heavy with tension. The hospital corridor buzzed with controlled urgency. Nurses moved swiftly. Machines hummed. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Abini lay on a stretcher, her eyes wide with fear. Yemi lay on another beside her, calm but quiet. Her younger brother Tunde squeezed her fingers. "You will be fine," he whispered. "You're stronger than you know." Yemi's mother stood near him, her lips moving in constant prayer. As they were wheeled toward the operating theater, Abini turned her head slightly toward Yemi. "Thank you," she mouthed. He smiled weakly. "See you on the other side." Hours passed. Outside, Tunde paced back and forth, his hands clasped tightly. Yemi's mother sat still, prayer beads slipping through her fingers one by one. Finally, a doctor emerged, pulling down his mask. "The surgeries went well," he announced. "We'll monitor them closely, but for now, we thank God." Relief crashed through the corridor like a wave. When Abini woke, pain greeted her first sharp insistent, but beneath it was something new. Lightness. Possibility. She turned her head and saw Yemi in the next bed, pale but smiling. "We made it," he whispered. Tears streamed down her face, not of fear this time, but of gratitude. Weeks passed slowly. Abini's body responded to the new kidney. The swelling reduced. Color returned to her face. She could sit up, then stand with help. Each small victory felt like a gift. Yemi healed too. He moved from bed to chair, then to short walks along the corridor with a walking stick. Every afternoon they walked together, taking careful steps, talking about small things, childhood memories, favorite foods, silly fears. "I thought I would die here," Abini admitted, one day pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "Forgotten. And I thought my accident was just bad luck," Yemi replied. "But maybe it brought me exactly where I was needed." One afternoon, as they rested under the small hospital tree, Abini asked, "What do you do outside this place?" Yemi smiled. "I run a small construction company. We build houses, shops. Nothing fancy." She nodded, impressed by his humility. As days turned into weeks, something gentle grew between them. It was not rushed, it was not loud. It was careful, respectful healing. Abini's heart was still bruised. Trust did not return easily. But every time she saw Yemi struggle through pain just to sit beside her bed, something mended quietly inside her. One morning, her lawyer, Mr. Adewale, arrived unannounced. "Abini," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." Tunde stepped closer. Yemi listened quietly from his chair. "Since you were hospitalized," the lawyer continued, "your husband has been making moves. He withdrew money from your joint account. He forged your signature on documents. He even attempted to sell your house." Abini's heart pounded. "What he told tenants, he now owns your properties. He moved another woman into your house." Fire replaced the numbness in her veins. "So, he was waiting for me to die," she said slowly. "So he could take everything." "Yes," the lawyer replied. "But the house is in your name. Legally, he has no right. If you're ready, we can act." For the first time in weeks, Abini sat up straighter. "I'm ready," she said calmly. "I've cried enough." Yemi watched her face transform not into bitterness, but into strength. The lioness was waking. Strength returned to Abini Okafor slowly, not like a sudden burst of energy, but like dawn creeping across a dark sky. Each day after the surgery, her body responded a little more to life. The swelling reduced. Her appetite returned in small portions. She could sit without dizziness, then stand with help. Nurses smiled more freely around her, now their voices lighter, hopeful. But while her body healed, something else inside her hardened, not into bitterness, but into clarity. The visit from her lawyer, Mr. Adewale, had cracked open a truth she could no longer ignore. As she lay in the hospital bed that night, staring at the ceiling, his words replayed in her mind. "He withdrew money. He forged your signature. He moved another woman into your house. Kunlay Adeyemi had not just abandoned her. He had prepared for her death." The realization hurt more than the surgery ever could. The next morning, Abini asked for her phone. "I want to speak to my lawyer again," she said quietly. Yemi Balagun, sitting nearby with his walking stick resting against the chair, looked at her with concern. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" "I need to be," she replied. "If I don't face this now, It will eat me alive later. Mr. Attawale arrived that afternoon with a folder thick with documents. He placed it gently on the small hospital table. "We need to move carefully," he began. "But the law is on your side." Abini listened attentively as he explained everything Kunlay had done in detail. "He accessed your joint account and transferred large sums," the lawyer said. "He forged your signature on withdrawal forms. He also attempted to sell your house, but the buyer insisted on seeing you before finalizing." Abini closed her eyes briefly. "So if I had died," she whispered, "he would have taken everything." Mr. Attawale finished softly. Tunde, her brother, clenched his fists. "That man is not human." Abani opened her eyes again. They were calm-focused. "What do we do?" she asked. "We freeze the accounts immediately," the lawyer replied. "We block any sale of property. We prepare evidence. And when you're discharged, we go home together with police presence." Yemi watched, quietly respect deepening in his gaze. This was not the broken woman he met weeks ago. This was a woman reclaiming herself. The following days were busy. Between medical checkups and physiotherapy sessions, Abini signed documents, recorded statements, and authorized her lawyer to act on her behalf. Bank accounts were frozen. Alerts were sent. Paper trails were gathered carefully. One crucial piece of evidence stood out. "The doctor recorded the call," Tunde said one evening, lowering his voice. "The one where Kunlay said those things." Abini's chest tightened. "Do we have it?" she asked. "Yes," Mr. Attawale confirmed. "It's clear, his voice, his words. That recording alone changes everything." For the first time since her illness began, Abini slept deeply that night. When the doctor finally discharged her, Abini did not return to her house immediately. She went to her mother's home instead, needing familiar walls and quiet care as her strength continued to rebuild. Mama Ifunanya welcomed her with tears and prayers. "My daughter," she whispered, holding Abini tightly, "you passed through fire." "I'm still here," Abini replied softly. "That's what matters." Yemi visited often, sometimes bringing fruits, sometimes simply sitting beside her in silence. He never pushed for anything. He never asked for explanations. He allowed her to heal at her own pace. "I should be visiting you," Abini said once, smiling faintly. "You gave me a kidney." Yemi chuckled. "My mother says I removed part of my stubbornness, too." They laughed gently. As the day of return approached, Mr. Attawale called with final arrangements. "The police will accompany us," he said. "Everything is ready." That evening, Abini sat quietly with her mother and brother. "Mama," she said, "I want to go home." Mama Ifunanya looked worried. "Are you sure I need to face him?" Abini replied. Not with anger, but with truth. Yemi arrived early the next morning, dressed simply, his movements still careful but steady. "Do you want me there?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Abini said without hesitation. "I don't want to face this alone." A police van waited outside. Mr. Attawale sat in another car, documents secured. As they drove toward Abini's house, her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with resolve. Inside the house, Kunlay and Sad were relaxed, laughing loudly as music played. A half-empty bottle of champagne sat on the table. Saide's pregnant belly rested comfortably beneath her dress. "When we travel next month, I want first class," Sad said. "Anything for you," Kunlay replied boastfully. "This house, those shops, everything is mine." A knock sounded at the door. Kunlay stood up confidently. Probably food delivery. He opened the door and froze. Abini stood there, thinner than before, yes, but standing, alive, eyes clear and unafraid. Behind her were two police officers, Mr. Attawale with his briefcase, Tunde and Yemi. The room fell silent. Abini Kunlay stammered, You're alive." She stepped inside slowly. Disappointed, Sade gasped. "You said she was Kunlay," shot her a look. quiet. Mr. Adewale stepped forward calmly. "Mr. Kunlay Adeyemi," he said, "you are under investigation for forgery, theft, and attempted illegal sale of property." Kunla laughed nervously. "This is my house. She's my wife." Mr. Adewale opened his file. "The house is registered solely in her name. You have no legal claim." Abini raised her phone and played the recording. Kunla's voice filled the room. "I will never give my kidney to that woman. If she dies, she dies." Sade's laughter followed in the recording. The color drained from Kunla's face. "So," Abini said quietly, "this is how you spoke while I was fighting for my life." Kunle's anger erupted. "You recorded me. Your own words recorded you," Tunde snapped. The police stepped forward. "Mr. Adeyemi, you'll come with us for questioning," one officer said. Kunle shouted, "You can't chase me out." Abini lifted her chin. "This is my house. You entered with nothing and you're leaving the same way." Sade tried to grab her bag, panic rising. "Madam," an officer said, stopping her, "you'll also explain how you benefited from stolen funds." Neighbors gathered outside murmuring. "That's the man who left his sick wife," someone whispered. As Kunla was led toward the van, he looked back at Abini. "You'll regret this," he spat. Abini shook her head. "I already regretted trusting you." Yemi stepped closer, standing beside her like a quiet shield. Kunle's eyes fell on him. "Who is this?" "The man who gave me what you refused, Abini," replied calmly. "His kidney, his courage." Kunla's face crumpled as realization struck too late. The door closed behind the police van. Silence returned. Abini exhaled deeply. Justice had begun to move. The house felt different after the police van disappeared down the street. It was the same building, same cream walls, same veranda, same mango tree casting shade over the yard, but the air inside had shifted. The laughter, the loud music, the careless confidence that once filled the rooms were gone. In their place was silence. Not the painful silence of abandonment, but a cautious, unfamiliar quiet. Abini Okafor stood in the middle of her living room and took a slow breath. For the first time in months, no one was lying to her. No one was taking from her. No one was waiting for her to die so they could inherit her life. Still, her hands trembled slightly. Mama Ifunanya moved around the house, gently opening windows, letting fresh air in. She picked up empty champagne bottles, shook her head, and placed them carefully into a trash bag without a word. Tunde checked the doors and locks with a seriousness that came from anger barely contained. Yemi Balagun remained quiet. He stood near the doorway, leaning lightly on his walking stick, observing without intruding. This was not his victory to celebrate. It was hers. Abini walked slowly from room to room. In the bedroom she paused. The wardrobe was open. Her clothes had been pushed to one side, wrinkled and neglected. A new scent lingered in the air, sharp, unfamiliar, invasive. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the urge to cry. "Do you want me to help you pack?" Mama Ifunanya asked softly. Abini shook her head. Not today. She needed to reclaim the space in her own way, at her own pace. That evening, after Mama Ifunanya and Tunde returned to her mother's house, Abini remained alone in the living room. Yemi had offered to leave, sensing she might need space. "You don't have to stay," she told him gently. "I know," he replied, "but I can if you want." She nodded. "Please." They sat on opposite ends of the sofa, the distance between them respectful, thoughtful. Outside, the street hummed with ordinary life children playing a radio, blaring somewhere a motorcycle passing. Abini broke the silence first. "I don't feel happy," she admitted quietly. "I thought I would." Yemi nodded slowly. "Freedom doesn't always feel like joy at first." She looked at him. "It feels empty." "That's normal," he said. "You lost a dream even if the man didn't deserve it." Her eyes filled with tears. I loved him, I really did. Yemi did not rush to respond. Loving someone doesn't mean you were wrong, he said finally. It means you were human. Abini wiped her face. I keep wondering what I could have done differently. Yemi shook his head. Nothing you did caused his cruelty. Some people see kindness as weakness. The words settled gently in her heart. That night, Abini slept in her own bed for the first time since leaving the hospital. Sleep came in fragments, short, uneasy dreams. But when morning arrived, she woke with a strange sense of grounding. She was alive. Days passed. Mr. Adewale called regularly, updating her on the legal process. Kunlay had been released on bail, but investigations continued. Most of the money he withdrew had been traced. Some was gone, but much was recoverable. The attempted sale of the house had been officially blocked. Justice takes time, the lawyer reminded her, but the worst is behind you. Abini focused on healing. She took her medication faithfully. She attended follow-up appointments. She listened to her body, now resting when needed, no longer pushing herself to exhaustion to prove worth. Yemi visited often, sometimes bringing soup, sometimes fruits, sometimes nothing at all, just his presence. One afternoon, as they sat on the veranda watching clouds drift slowly across the sky, Abini spoke again. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. Yemi turned to her. "Regret what?" "Giving me your kidney." He smiled faintly. "Never. But your life will be different," she insisted. "It already was," he replied. "Before the accident, before the hospital, I was always running. Chasing money, chasing projects. I never stopped to think who I was becoming. And now I know," he said. "I want a life that means something." Abini studied his face carefully. There was no pride in his words, no expectation, just quiet conviction. As weeks turned into months, the house slowly transformed. Abini cleaned not in a frantic way, but intentionally. She washed curtains, rearranged furniture, donated clothes that carried painful memories. With each small act, the house felt more like hers again. Yemi helped when she asked. He fixed a loose hinge. He changed light bulbs. He never assumed authority over the space. One evening, as they cooked together for the first time, Abini laughed unexpectedly when Yemi nearly burned the rice. "I think the kitchen rejected you," she teased. He raised his hands. "I accept defeat." The laughter surprised them both. It was the first time joy entered the house without pain attached. As the months passed, neighbors adjusted too. Some apologized for believing gossip. Others simply nodded respectfully, understanding that Abini had endured something many women feared. One afternoon, a neighbor said quietly, "You're strong." Abini smiled. "I didn't know I was. I just survived." Yemi watched these interactions with admiration, careful not to step into a role she had not invited him into. But feelings grew anyway. They grew in small moments, in shared meals, in long conversations about childhood, in comfortable silence that did not need explanation. Still, Abini remained cautious. One evening under the mango tree, she spoke honestly. "I'm scared," she said. "Marriage almost killed me." Yemi listened. "I don't want to promise anything I can't keep," he replied. "But I know this. I will never leave you alone in pain." She looked at him. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've already lived it," he said simply. And I stayed. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they were not from despair. They were from release. Far away, Kunlay Adeyemi was discovering the cost of his choices. Sod left him when money dried up and police visits became frequent. She returned to her family with the pregnancy, unwilling to be tied to scandal. Kunlay moved into a small rented room far from the house he once claimed as his own. Sometimes, late at night, he remembered Abini, not the sick woman in the hospital, but the strong woman standing at the door alive, unbroken, reclaiming her life. Regret followed him like a shadow. Abini did not. Her life was moving forward now, one careful step at a time, and for the first time since love had betrayed her, hope was no longer a stranger. It was sitting quietly beside her. Healing did not announce itself with fireworks in Abini Okafor's life. It came quietly disguised as routine. Pills taken on time. Follow-up visits kept. Long walks shortened when her body asked for rest. She learned to listen to fatigue, to hunger, to the small warnings she had ignored for years while trying to be everything for everyone. Her doctor was pleased. "The kidney is functioning well," he said during one appointment. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing." Exactly what she was doing included something new, choosing herself. She no longer rushed through days. She no longer apologized for resting. She no longer explained her boundaries. And somewhere within that steadiness, her relationship with Yemi Balagun deepened naturally without pressure. Yemi never pushed. He never tried to define what they were becoming. He showed up consistently and quietly. He drove her to appointments when she asked. He waited in the car when she wanted privacy. He cooked badly but tried sincerely. He listened without interrupting. One evening, as they sat on the veranda, watching the sun slide behind neighboring roofs, Abini broke a silence that had felt comfortable. "I used to think love had to be loud," she said. "Grand gestures. Sacrifice that hurts." Yemi nodded. "That's what movies teach us." "But now," she continued, "I think love might be gentler than that." "Love that shouts often hides insecurity," Yemi replied. "Love that stays quiet is usually sure of itself." She smiled faintly. "You always have a way with words." He shrugged. "I've had time to think." They laughed softly. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted subtly. Rain fell more often, washing dust from the streets and softening the air. With each passing day, Abini's strength returned not just to her body, but to her spirit. One afternoon, she surprised herself. "Come with me," she said to Yemi, grabbing her bag. "Where?" he asked. "My fabric shop," she replied. "I haven't been there since everything." The shop smelled familiar cotton dye memory. Customers greeted her warmly, relief and admiration mixing in their voices. "You're looking strong," one woman said. "I am," Abini replied simply. Yemi stood back, watching her interact with ease, noticing how her confidence returned when she stood in her own world. He did not interrupt. He did not claim space. On the way home, Abini spoke again. "I forgot who I was," she admitted. "I became someone else's support system and disappeared inside it." Yemi nodded. "It happens when love is unbalanced. I won't do that again," she said quietly. "I wouldn't want you to," he replied. That night, Abini lay awake thinking not of fear, but of possibility. Her heart, once guarded tightly, began to loosen its grip. Still, she needed time. She told Yemi one evening, sitting beneath the mango tree where her first proposal had once taken place. "I care about you," she said honestly. "But I'm still healing. I don't want to rush into anything just because you saved my life." Yemi met her eyes calmly. "I didn't save your life to claim it. Take all the time you need." The words mattered more than she expected. Gradually, affection grew not from obligation, not from gratitude, but from shared values and shared silence. They spoke about faith, about fear, about the kind of people they wanted to become. Yemi talked about his construction business, how he wanted to build affordable housing without exploiting workers. Abini spoke about mentoring young women, teaching them financial independence. Their dreams aligned without effort. One evening, as they cooked together, Abini paused suddenly. "Yemi," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I ask you something, of course?" "Why didn't you walk away?" she asked. "You had every reason to." Yemi set the spoon down gently. "My father left when things got hard," he said quietly. I promised myself I wouldn't become that man. When I saw you alone in that hospital bed, I knew walking away would change me into someone I didn't want to be." Abini's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared to believe in men again," she admitted. "That's understandable," he said. "Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild overnight." She reached for his hand. "But it rebuilds," she whispered. Months later, the legal case against Kunlay moved slowly, as many cases did. Some money was recovered, some was lost forever. Kunlay's name became associated with shame rather than pride. People who once praised him avoided eye contact. Abini no longer followed the updates closely. She had moved on. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Yemi invited Abini to take a walk by a nearby stream. Children played along the banks. The sound of water carried calm. They sat on a stone watching ripples dance. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Yemi said carefully. Her heart skipped. "Okay, I don't want to rush you," he continued, "and I don't want to pressure you. But I need you to know how I feel." She nodded, bracing herself. "I love you," Yemi said simply. "Not because of what you have or what you survived. I love you because of who you are when no one is watching." Tears streamed down Abini's face, not from fear but from recognition. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Marriage almost broke me." "I know," he said softly. "I can't promise a life without pain, but I promise presence. If sickness comes, I'll be by your bed. If money comes, we'll share it. If trouble comes, we'll face it together." She took a long breath. "I love you too," she said, "but I want to move slowly." Yemi smiled. Slow is perfect. They chose a simple path. Families met quietly. Food was cooked. Elders talked more than necessary. Advice flowed freely, sometimes wisely, sometimes not. When they married, it was not a flashy celebration. There were no grand displays, but the joy ran deep. As they stood before the pastor, he asked, "Do you take this woman to love and cherish in sickness and in health?" Yemi smiled gently. "I already have," he said. "But yes, I do." Abini laughed through her tears. This time, the words meant everything. Years passed. Abini's health remained stable. She took her medicine, faithfully kept her appointments, respected her limits. Yemi's business grew steadily. They built not just houses, but trust. They had a daughter with bright eyes and curious questions. They named her Imale Light. Sometimes when Abini sat in the living room holding Imale on her lap, she told her a story. Once upon a time, she would begin, there was a woman who loved deeply and was betrayed. And then Imale would ask. And then Abini would smile. She learned that real love doesn't abandon. It stays. Outside, the mango tree swayed gently in the breeze. Life once broken had been rebuilt not from denial but from truth. Life moved forward steadily for Abini Okafor, but it did not move the same way for Kunlay Adeyemi. While Abini learned how to breathe again, slowly, deliberately, Kunlay learned what it meant to fall without a hand to catch him. The legal case did not end quickly. It dragged through offices and courtrooms marked by adjournments and paperwork. But even before a final judgment was reached, the consequences of Kunlay's actions had already begun to shape his new reality. The money he took did not last. What he spent freely on drinks hotels and false confidence disappeared faster than he expected. When accounts were frozen and access cut off, panic followed. The friends who once praised his boss life stopped answering his calls. Tunde, who used to bring him business leads, avoided him completely. At the printing shop, suppliers demanded payment up front. Customers stopped trusting him. The landlord came again, this time with finality. Kunlay packed his belongings into a small bag and left the shop, quietly avoiding eyes that once looked at him with respect. Sade did not stay. At first, she complained about the police visits, about the gossip, about the sudden change in lifestyle. Then, one evening, she announced her decision. "I can't do this," she said flatly. "I didn't sign up for disgrace." Kunlay stared at her. "You said you loved me. I loved what you showed me," she replied. "Not this." She left with her pregnancy and her certainty returning to her family. Kunlay was left alone in a small rented room with thin walls and thinner hope. At night, regret sat beside him. He remembered Abini not as the woman in the hospital bed, but as the woman who believed in him when no one else did. The woman who paid his debts quietly. The woman who fed him when his shop was empty. The woman who begged him to stand by her and whom he dismissed like an inconvenience. Now there was no applause, no admiration, only whispers. "That's the man who left his sick wife. He wanted her dead. God is watching." The whispers followed him everywhere. Meanwhile, Abini focused on living. Her health remained stable. She attended regular checkups, followed her doctor's instructions, and honored her limits. She returned to work, gradually choosing balance over exhaustion. Her fabric business flourished again, not because she pushed herself mercilessly, but because she worked with intention. Yemi Balagun remained her steady companion. Their marriage settled into something comfortable and real. They argued occasionally, laughed often, and learned each other's rhythms with patience. There were no power struggles, no need to prove dominance. Decisions were shared. Silence was respected. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Abini spoke thoughtfully. "I used to think justice meant seeing him suffer," she said. Yemi looked at her. "And now I think justice is living well without carrying bitterness," she replied. He smiled. "That's a harder kind of justice," she nodded. "But it's lighter." Months later, the court ruling came. Kunlay was ordered to repay a portion of the money he took. He lost any claim to Abini's property permanently. His name was formally associated with fraud limiting future opportunities. It was not dramatic. There were no chains or headlines. But it was final. When Abini heard the news, she closed her eyes briefly, not in triumph, but in release. "It's done," she said quietly. Yemi squeezed her hand. "It is." They did not celebrate. They simply went home and cooked dinner together. That night, Abini slept deeply. Time passed. Abini and Yemi's daughter, Emily, grew quickly. She asked endless questions and laughed freely, unaware of the storms that had preceded her existence. Sometimes, Abini watched her play beneath the mango tree and marveled at how life could still be gentle after being cruel. One afternoon, Abini received a message from an unknown number. It was Kunlay. "I'm sorry," it read. "I know it's late. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I think about you every day." Abini stared at the message for a long time. Then she deleted it, not out of anger, out of closure. She had forgiven him already, not for his sake, but for her own peace. There was nothing more to say. Yemi noticed her quietness later that evening. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she replied softly, "just letting go of something I no longer need." He nodded, understanding without explanation. Far away, Kunlay sat on his thin mattress staring at his phone, waiting for a response that never came. Regret had become his closest companion. He realized too late that he had traded something rare for something empty. But life does not rewind itself for regret. It only teaches. Abini's story began to reach others quietly. Women who heard of her journey came to speak with her not to gossip, but to learn. She shared her experience, openly encouraging them to protect themselves financially, emotionally, and spiritually. "Love should not cost you your life," she told them, "and kindness should never be punished with silence." Her words carried weight because they were lived, not rehearsed. Yemi watched her become a voice of healing, proud but never possessive. One evening, as they sat together under the mango tree, Abini rested her head against his shoulder. "I never imagined my life would turn out like this," she said. "Me neither," he replied. "But I'm grateful. "So am I," she said. The mango tree swayed gently above them, leaves whispering stories of endurance and renewal. Life had tested Abini harshly, but it had also restored her stronger, wiser, and surrounded by love that stayed. Time has a way of settling things that once felt unbearable. For Abini Okafor, life no longer moved in sharp turns or painful jolts. It flowed. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but honestly. Each morning she woke beside Yemi Balagun with gratitude instead of fear. Her body, once fragile and failing, now responded to care and discipline. Her heart, once shattered, beat with quiet confidence. She had survived. And more importantly, she had chosen how to live afterward. The final chapter of Kunlay Adiemi's story unfolded without drama. There were no public apologies, no grand confessions, just consequences. He found work as a casual laborer at a construction site on the outskirts of the city. Long hours under the sun, low pay, no admiration. Men who once envied him now barely noticed him. When they did, their looks carried judgment instead of respect. At night, Kunlay lay on a thin mattress staring at the ceiling, replaying memories that refused to fade. Abini's laughter in the early days, her food when his shop was empty, her tears in the hospital bed, her calm voice as she took back her house and her life. Regret became his constant companion. But regret, unlike redemption, asks for nothing and gives nothing back. Sade never returned. The child was born, far away, raised without his presence. Kunlay's name became a cautionary tale whispered among men who believed pride mattered more than character. Meanwhile, Abini's life blossomed quietly. Her fabric business expanded into a training space for young women. On Saturdays, she taught them how to manage money, how to register property, how to protect themselves legally. She spoke not from theory, but from scars that had healed. Love should not make you smaller, she told them. If it does, ask why. Yemi supported her without overshadowing her. His construction company grew steadily built on fairness and patience. He hired responsibly paid workers on time and refused shortcuts that compromised integrity. Their home became a place of warmth. Laughter returned fully when their daughter Imole learned to run across the living room, her tiny feet echoing against tiled floors. She asked questions endlessly, her curiosity a daily reminder that life was meant to move forward. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, Abini held Imole on her lap and told her stories not of pain but of lessons. There was once a woman, she would say softly, who loved deeply and trusted fully. And what happened, Imole would ask. She learned that love without respect can destroy, Abini replied. But love with truth can heal. Imole would nod seriously, absorbing wisdom far beyond her years. One evening, as rain fell gently outside, Abini sat alone on the veranda reflecting. The mango tree above her swayed softly, the same tree that once held a promise built on illusion. Now it witnessed a life rebuilt on truth. Yemi joined her, placing a warm cup of tea in her hands. Thinking again, he asked with a smile. "Always," she replied, "but not with sadness anymore." He sat beside her. "That's growth." Abini leaned her head against his shoulder. "I used to think my story ended in that hospital," she said quietly. "I thought abandonment was the final chapter." And now Yemi asked. "And now, I see," she said, "that sometimes what breaks you is what frees you." They sat in silence, comfortable and complete. Far away, Kunlay passed by a hospital one evening on his way home from work. He slowed his steps unconsciously, memories flooding back. For a moment he stopped and looked at the building, the place where his choices had been laid bare. Then he continued walking. Some doors once closed do not reopen, and that is how the story settled. A woman who was abandoned in sickness did not die. She did not beg. She did not harden into bitterness. She healed. She reclaimed her life. She chose love that stayed. And a man who mistook pride for power learned too late that character is the only wealth that never fades. Sometimes life teaches its deepest lessons through pain we never asked for. This story reminds us that love is not proven by words spoken in comfort, but by presence shown in crisis. Abini gave love freely, believing sacrifice would be met with loyalty. Instead, betrayal revealed a hard truth: anyone who only stands with you when you are strong was never truly standing with you at all. Yet, this is not a story about loss. It is a story about survival dignity and the quiet power of choosing yourself. Real strength is not in enduring suffering endlessly, but in knowing when to stop bleeding for people who would never stop hurting you. True love does not compete with your success, resent your independence, or abandon you when life turns dark. True love stays. It protects. It sacrifices without demanding repayment. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places, carried by people who see your worth even when you are at your weakest. Life does not always restore what we lose, but it often replaces it with something wiser, deeper, and more honest. Healing is not forgetting what happened. Healing is learning that what broke you did not end you. It refined you. If the story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what part of this journey spoke to you the most? And if you believe stories like this can inspire, heal, and remind us of our worth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another one.